moving on to the next speaker of today, Mr. Rajan Sethuraman. He's the CEO of Legend View Analytics, which is one of the very, very prominent company which started, with data analytics as a very, very strong portfolio. Because when we all started thinking of data analytics, started learning data analytics, they were one among few who made that as a portfolio, and it became a large analytics company now. And he was actually earlier the Chief Human Resources Officer, turned into a CEO, and it was a real new combination. And he's worked with Accenture, and we know him from the Accenture time, and KPMG. He's been with consulting, and he's a graduate from BECH Pilani and also post graduation from IIM Calcutta. So we are eager to hear. Listen to you, and all the educators of more than 3,500 from across India are here, and I would now request Mr. Rajan to take over the session from now.
Thank you, Anbu. Can you hear me all right?
Yes, perfect.
Okay, I just want to warn that my connection is a little unstable, and if I get disconnected, I will rejoin in a minute or so, so just bear with me. I tried using the hotspot, but the video quality is not so good. Hopefully this will last and I won't have any power cuts right while this is on. Great. So first of all, thank you for having me on this panel. I have always enjoyed interacting with Anbu and Dr. Sokumar and others from the ICT Academy and participating in the various different panel discussions and events that they have organized. I've been associated with them since my Accenture days, as Anbu just mentioned. Rather than talk about data and analytics specifically, I decided that I will use the opportunity to lay a bit of a broader foundation. So my topic today is the future of trust. Okay, and trust is kind of as broad as it gets, because fundamentally at the heart of all human as well as entity interactions, trust is a very, very important component. So be it between consumers and the companies that are trying to sell their products and services to those consumers, or be it between employees and employers, or be it between patients and hospitals and healthcare systems, or even be it between citizens and governments. Trust is a very, very fundamental aspect of how you make interactions smoother, more efficient, and more effective. So my topic on the future of trust is oriented towards how this trust is likely to evolve in the days to come in the wake of the COVID-19 crisis, but more importantly also some of the underlying demographic, socio-economic forces that we have seen at play over the last decade or couple of decades, ever since the dawn of the IT revolution. So in some sense, trust and the equation of trust and how trust is established has been changing. And that presents a lot of opportunity. It presents a lot of opportunities for companies, for entrepreneurs, for students, for academic institutions and educators, in terms of how are you going to understand the changing dynamics of trust, and how do you therefore reorient your own models so that you're able to capitalize on these changes. So that's really what my topic is today. In the COVID-19 scenario, you see trust again coming to the fore in a very significant way. We have at the highest level trust issues between countries, and you see countries being wary of what other countries are saying and sharing, right? And that creates a bit of a challenge. Likewise, trust is an issue even when anytime somebody is working with anyone else, it becomes a matter of concern. Senthil talked about how these days we are moving more to a gig economy and a team-oriented, agile model of development, right? In many walks of life. And even in those situations, trust between the team members becomes very important. So it is not just an equation which flows in a hierarchical manner, because a lot of the things that I mentioned earlier, like citizens and government, or between employer and employers, there's a bit of a hierarchical relationship. But even in the absence of hierarchy, trust is a very important component. Everyone knows that trust is the foundation of human relationships, right? When it comes to a marriage or having children or living in any kind of community and familial setup. Now, what are the models that are at play when it comes to establishing trust, and how are these things changing or evolving? I see these falling into three broad kind of categories. One model of trust is what I call the local relationship-based model, right? This model is apparent when you know the person, right, intimately. So, for example, when I go back to my school days, I used to live in one of the suburbs of Chennai, and we had only one general physician in our community, and any problem that we had, be it a cold or a headache or a tummy ache or whatever, we used to go to that person, right? And because he was the one general physician that was serving the community, we were not a very large community at that time, right? This is in East Tambaram, it was still developing. He knew every one of us. He knew every one of the families. He knew every one of the children in the families, and therefore, without having to delve into any major database, for example, he knew our history because it was just there on his mental map. And therefore, the kind of relationship that he had with us was something that was founded on personal experience and interpersonal relationships. And we used to trust him implicitly because he knew us, right? In terms of my past history of ailments or challenges, he was aware of these things. That's one model of trust, right? When people know one another very intimately. I'll come back to this when I give some examples on how this is likely to play out in the coming years. The second model is one that is based on what I call either hierarchy or authority, right? These are kind of the patriarchal models that are in play. And what I mean by that is the type of model that you will see between teacher and student, for example, or a trust model that exists between parent and child, or sometimes even the trust model that exists between, say, a government and an employee of the government. Because here, the trust is derived more by way of the hierarchy that is in place, the position and the authority that the hierarchy provides, and you tend to implicitly trust and believe somebody who is in a position of authority or in a position or in a hierarchical level who's above you. And these kind of models have been in prevalence in many places. They are prevalent even today. I mean, China's response to the COVID-19 crisis and their ability to deal with this in a very, very strong, emphatic, time-bound manner, to a very great extent, flows from the hierarchical model of trust. You can delve into the details. You will find that how they were able to swing into action very quickly. The third model of trust, one that is emerging and one that can potentially find favor in several ways, is what I call as the democratic data-based or technology-based model, right? Everybody knows this famous quote by Mr. Narayana Murthy, who said that in God we trust, everybody else brings data, right? And data and analytics and technology, they provide the foundations for trust increasingly in the modern world, right? When we talk about how do you trust a company or a healthcare provider or anybody for that matter, is there data that establishes the foundation for the trust? That's an emerging model. And what this data really does and what this information really does is it solves the information asymmetry. Why is there a lack of trust? More often than not, a lack of trust is because you don't have the same information as the other person or the other party has. There is an information asymmetry, and therefore you are worried whether visibility that you have into the context and the environment and the situation is adequate and is it the same as what the other party has. In fact, people say that the origin of the handshake when people meet one another is because people wanted to, of course, now we are going to the Namaste model, and I think that is equally good. But you have some interesting ways by which information asymmetry has been challenged and has been tackled in the past. Today, we have very, very good technology-based models that are emerging, right, in terms of solving the information asymmetry and the trust problem. Let me go back to each of the models and then elaborate a little bit on how that model really plays out, and therefore what kind of opportunities might be there, right, as you move forward in terms of implementing that type of a model for building trust. So in a relationship-based model, the first one that I spoke about, where the trust is established because you personally know one another, the real foundation there is what I call in-person connect, right? I gave the example of the doctor that we had in our community. You are focused more on local networks. You are trying to build resilience through self-sufficiency. Today, everybody talks about resilience in the COVID-19 context because your supply chains are far-flung, and you might be actually sourcing components and products and services from a manufacturer who's sitting thousands of miles away from you, right, as part of your supply chain, and you really don't know and you don't trust whether the components will arrive in time, whether they are free of the infectious agent, for example, right? I mean, you have all of these kind of challenges in mind. One model of approaching this trust would be to form very local networks. In fact, many of the countries and companies in their bid to increasing resiliency in today's scenario are saying that, let me compromise a little bit on economies of scale. Let me compromise a bit on cost economics and reducing manufacturing costs. But instead, I will focus more on resilience and the trust that comes through local networks and local manufacturing. So you see a lot of that movement happening today. Now that presents opportunities for people. The reason I'm saying all this is because the more we move towards a relationship-based trust model, which is one of the models, I'm not saying that this is the only model that will play out, but this is one of the models that could play out, right? You're going to see a lot more of local networks. You're going to see a lot more of local action, local manufacturing, local resilience being built because of just the need to feel the trust through a more in-person, interpersonal mechanism, as opposed to something that is far-flung, distant, based on a hierarchy or based on a technology model. Now, what will be the kind of disciplines that will play out in this kind of relation? Disciplines like psychology, disciplines like economics and humanities, sociology will come to the fore. I know that this group that is attending the session here today is not engineering, just engineering. I mean, you represent different types of disciplines. I see the re-emergence of these disciplines like psychology and humanities and sociology become a fairly important component of understanding and capitalizing on the relationship-based trust models. So today, everybody talks more about, will the Kirana shops that are just there around the corner become the more important and nodal points of retail commerce, as opposed to somebody, as opposed to a mall or a supermarket that might be now available in a distant place, because of challenges involved in commuting to the place, the challenge involved in an air-conditioned environment, which is more conducive for infectious agents, the challenges involved in social distancing, right, in such a place. In a Kirana shop, you are a lot more assured. We will see the emergence of more high-touch models. When I say high-touch models, models which involve more personal interaction, models which will bring people together closer, and one-to-one type of interactions, as opposed to one-to-many type of models. Okay, so these are opportunities that will be available. So anybody who's going to look at becoming an entrepreneur, starting something on their own, or even learning the kind of technologies and the tools of the trade, they can look at how the emergence of these high-touch models, such as the Kirana shops, will become more prominent and important, right, in the days to come. Small, medium businesses, I see a huge opportunity and potential for revival, right, as the COVID-19 scenario plays out over the next 18 to 24 months. And some of these things will fundamentally alter how we interact and how we do commerce. So therefore, it's kind of a good thing to keep in mind. Now, going to the second model, which was the hierarchical model that I talked about, I said that in a hierarchical model, one goes back more to agency interventions. These agencies could be agencies of governance and government, like the law and order setup, for example, or the judicial setup of a country, the political system, right? There is greater trust in authority, right, in these kind of models. So therefore, you look up to people in authority, and therefore, you feel comforted in the fact that your trust comes from a position of authority. Ideology and culture will become more important in these type of situations. loyalty will be a pretty big factor that plays out in a hierarchical based model. And when it comes to therefore understanding these models better, I see the emergence and re-emergence of politics, study of history, a study of law, for example, right? These things will become very important if this kind of a model plays out. I'm not saying that this will be the only model again, but as I just pointed out, China is capitalizing on this type of a model, right, in terms of implementing the response to the COVID-19 scenario. And this model will have its advantages, pros and cons. It is possible to act much faster with a more decisive mindset in this type of a model, as opposed to a democratic model, for example, or a model where you are really dependent on knowing every person one-on-one in order to build the trust. The authority model automatically provides the trust because of just the position of authority itself. So in this type of a model, there will be other kind of opportunities that will emerge in terms of for entrepreneurship, for studies, for learning, for the type of jobs that are available. And again, these will be dependent on how this model flows out. My own personal take is that the hierarchical model will prove efficient and effective in certain kind of circumstances. But my favorite is the third model that I talked about, which is the democratic technology-based model that uses the power of data and analytics for disintermediation, for eliminating the information asymmetry that I talked about. Because the moment you eliminate information asymmetry, automatically everybody has the same information, and it is possible to trust one another, because it's not that I have something hidden from the other person that gives me or gives the other person an advantage or a disadvantage. So data and analytics will be a very, very important aspect of such a model. Cybersecurity is going to be a very, very important thing, because it is not just about having the data and getting the data, but being able to protect the data and making sure that the data is available and accessible to the right people for the right purpose. So these things will become important. Algorithms will rise to the fore. We are already seeing the advent of artificial intelligence and machine learning and other such algorithms that are coming in to solve some of these problems of information asymmetry, as well as decision making in such scenarios where everybody benefits, where there is a common good that is strived for. Of course, the people who build the algorithms will have an advantage, and therefore the constant scrutiny will be on whether the algorithms that are being built by the Facebooks and the Googles and the others of the world, right, whether they go to serve the company or whether they go to serve the community. So you've heard about the recent investment that Facebook has made in Reliance Jio, and their stated mission is really to try and connect the farmers with the end consumers. So if they can actually solve the information asymmetry problem and the intermediation that is there between the producers and the end consumers, using the power of data and algorithms, then you dramatically increase trust, you build trust right within the system. So that's the model that might play out. Now, what kind of skills and what kind of learning will be important in this model? Of course, information technology, data science, systems engineering, problem solving techniques, and more core disciplines like finance, a chartered accountancy, law, right? Because these are the ones that help you understand the risk and make sure that systems are being compliant with the kind of mechanisms that are being put in place. We know about the Arogya Setu app that's been launched by the government. It's a great example of this solving the information asymmetry, because even before I step out of my home, I know what is the data and the information around people who are infected and people who are tested positive and people who are quarantined, and whether I'm in a safe zone, right? It solves a problem. Of course, one is worried whether the government is going to monitor this all the time and use the data for other kinds of nefarious purposes. And one hopes that that is not the case, which is why that cybersecurity and the policies that I mentioned becomes important. But it's a great beginning in terms of how citizens and government can actually come together to solve the information asymmetry problem and build trust in one another using the power of data and technology. Blockchain will be a big thing, right? This again will solve problems about information asymmetry and the lack of knowledge and awareness about source and origination of not just agricultural produce and manufactured components, but even masks, vaccines. Everybody today talks about how the masks are the accelerated testing kits, the rapid test kits are proving to be ineffective, right? imagine a blockchain model if it had been in place, which really helps you understand who made it and how they made it and what temperature and conditions they should be kept under, so that none of this problem is there. All of that will get recorded in a blockchain. China claims, for example, that we didn't know how to handle that equipment and that's why it is faulty. But a blockchain-based mechanism can record everything, right from the time the component was manufactured to the time that the component was actually used for performing a test. You can record using IoT and sensor data exactly on what are the conditions, pressure, temperature under which the components were maintained. So blockchain can be a great addition to solving the problem of trust in this scenario. Marketplaces and platforms will proliferate. We have already seen the emergence of the Airbnbs and the Olas and the Ubers of the world, which actually help tackle this problem, eliminating information asymmetry and bringing consumers, producers, and service providers together. We will see the emergence of that even more in the coming times. Now, I believe that any of these models are possible. Any of these models can play out. So I just wanted to kind of give a bit of an inkling of how models of trust are likely to evolve in the coming days and how learning, understanding, and practicing and applying different disciplines will become important, right, in the days to come. So it is not just going to be technology alone. It is also going to be sociology and psychology and humanities and economics and finance and all of that stuff. So those of you who have an interest in those areas, I would say that it's a great time, right? I know that the COVID-19 scenario is very scary and everybody is worried about what is going to happen and what is going to be the end game and all that. But emerging out of all of this upheaval and disruption and chaos, there are going to be opportunities for everybody. As long as you're passionate about what you're learning and what you're doing, there will be opportunities plentiful when you come out of this. So just put your head down, learn, equip yourself, and you'll come out successful on top. That's really what I had to share today. Thank you.
Excellent, sir. Thank you. Thank you very much for your inspiring session. I think you started telling you will not go into data analytics, but you cannot. No, you cannot. No, everything around us is data. And no, we can never live without data. Forget you are a data analytics company. No, we even know every citizen is today aware, and every company they're very clear that that is the future. I think you made very clear to the entire educated community, and you gave multiple perspectives. And thank you so much for your wonderful session. Sir, request the Vice Chancellor if he has any closing note to close. Can you just switch on the...
It was very interesting to hear the two experts. I also started noting down. In fact, Sri Senthil Nayagam has given additional inputs for the educators to design and go ahead with this. And about LXP was very interesting topic which you have mentioned, sir. About virtual labs, yes, universities are working towards it, and we are trying to implement it. And I think this, and you also very precisely, set the targets or goals for the present day teachers, how to be very effective in this. When I said classroom or lecture halls, it is again with the digital interventions only. The teachers must have a video lecture downloaded from YouTube, and as you said precisely, so allow them to see for 3-4 minutes or 5 minutes, and then intervene, ask questions. So that is the kind of classroom technique the teachers have to change. It is a very good takeaway from the session, and I think Senthil sir ignited the thoughts of all educators. Coming back to Sri Rajan sir, very nicely he narrated, as rightly pointed by Anbu, you cannot live without data analytics. So you have been a man of that kind. And also based on the data analytics, I think the countries are planning their exit from lockdown period. The way in which the deaths occurred, or the people affected, people discharged from negative results, etc. A lot of things have given. And as you said, our own data analytics every day at home will be of great use to bring in harmony in the system and the society. And definitely the third model is the answer in my personal opinion. Forget about those two, hierarchical and those kind of things. They have their own plus and minus. But the model Sir Rajan sir suggested, technology based. It is, I think, from the perspective of the society, it is impartial model. From the perspective of technologies, it is going to be accurate model. So that's how I think this session I have given a lot of thought for the people, especially the educators, and also redefining our learning process. In fact, I stopped using teaching word the day I became vice chancellor. So I started telling learning, and there is no limit. So creating the self-learners itself is a big challenge to my teaching community. I think without taking much of your time, I must thank both the experts for igniting all the educators, and also the relationship between industries and the education institution will go a long way in achieving our set goals. And not the last, but this ICT Academy in this time, having these kind of sessions, and very interesting to have people across the country, and I think it has set a very good objective in everyone's mind. So we can think about it. Maybe the schools and colleges will start only after May end, probably. That's what is the guidelines, UGC guidelines is talking about. I think we have another 1 month useful month to think and plan our educational and industrial activities. As Rajan sir said, there is going to be a lot of opportunities. Of course, as I said, there will be miseries, there are sorrows, but which is not in our hand. With all the interventions, with all the health care measures, the whole globe is suffering. Though many are working, the frontline warriors are working working day and night. But some certain things are beyond our control. But yes, this has definitely created opportunities. In fact, I should replace my word challenge by opportunities after hearing to Rajan. So with these few words, I once again thank ICT Academy, especially the Anbu sir, Senthil sir, and Rajan, and also Lakshmi Narayan sir and Vishnu for constantly, being in touch with me, and Shivakumar ji, the CEO of this ICT Academy. So once again, I thank you all, and I wish all the best to the participants and the educators, and let us work together. I think togetherness is going to be the rule of the game for achieving something special in this country. And as I said, let us make this country as education destiny and industry destiny with the opportunities going to be created. Thank you all. Thank you, ICT Academy.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much, the Honorable Vice Chancellor. No, he actually took a role of even summarizing the entire session. And thanks a lot to you for being so humble. You are ensured every faculty member is given a very positive message, and you took all the inputs of both the industry experts, and you made it easy for everybody to get re-emphasized. So thank you very much, sir, for joining the session. And thank you, Mr. Senthil, sir.
Yeah, we'll keep in touch.